In this video, we're going to put data validation on our Next.js API route handlers. You might think that with the server actions, we don't need the API endpoints in Next.js anymore. But if you're going to feed some third-party apps like mobile app or other microservices, you still need your API handlers. So now let's see how we can put data validation on our route handlers in Next.js app routing. Okay, I open up a Next.js version 14 project, and in the first step, we need to create an API endpoint. So I go to the app directory, and here I'm going to create a directory called API, and then inside it, we're going to create a register route. Okay, and then inside it, we're going to create the route handler, route.ts file. Okay, so in this file, we're going to create a post function. So here I'm going to say export async function post. So for example, let's say this post API is responsible for registering a new user into our database. So here I'm going to define a parameter, the request, okay, and set its type to the next request. Okay, now let's define the body of the function. So as I said, this API is for registering a new user into our database. So we expect the data about the user in the body of this post request. In order to access to the body of the request, we can call the request.json function. And since this is a async function, we're going to use the await before it. This will give us the body object. So we can say const body and set it to request.json function. Okay. So for now, let's just simply return the body from this API. So I'm going to use next response here, that JSON, and then put the body inside it. Okay, so now let's test our API. So I open up the terminal and run the server npm run dev. Okay, so I bring up the Insomnia. And here, as you can see, we are going to send a post request to the localhost 3000/API and then /register. So if I click on the send here, you can see nobody returns from the response because the body of the request is empty. So now here, let's include a body inside our request. For example, let's include a name and set it to my channel name, for example. Okay, and then if I click on the send, you can see the body of the post request in the response object. So in this way, we can access to the body of the post request inside a Next.js API. All right, but the question is that how we can put validation on our API. So in order to do that, we're going to use Zod package. So I get back to the VS Code and then create another terminal. Okay, and then we're going to install the Zod package. So I use bound for installing that, bound at Zod, but you can use npmi instead. Okay, so I get back to our post API, and here the first step in the data validation is to create a schema for our API. As I said, this API is for registering a new user into our database. So we expect the first name, last name, email, phone of the user, and the password of the user to be inside the body of this post API. So here, let's create a schema for this data. Const register schema, okay, and then use the Zod for that. So I need to import the Z from the Zod. So here I'm going to say import Z from Zod, okay, and then here in the register schema, we can call the Z.object, okay, and then pass the configuration object here. And here we need to define our fields that need to be inside our schema. So the first one is the first name, and then we're going to set it to z.string because it is going to be a string. And then we can put some constraint on the length of this string. We're going to change the min function and say that the minimum length of this string should be 1. And also we can chain a max function and say that the maximum length of this string must be, for example, 52. Okay. And in the same way, we can create the last name. I just copy the first name here and just rename it to last name. Okay. Next, we're going to have a email field. So here I'm going to say email and set it to z.string because it is going to be a string as well. But here we can just change the email function. It will say that this field should be a valid email. Okay. The next one is going to be a phone number. So here we can say that phone, and then we can call the z.string here. And here we can use the refine function in order to validate the phone number. So I chain the refine function here. Okay. We need to pass a callback function as the parameter of this refine function. And that callback function should return true or false. So now let's pass the callback function. It takes the value of the phone field, and here we should return true or false. If we return true from this callback function, it says that the phone field is valid. But if we return false from this callback, it says that the phone is not valid. So here we need to create a function that checks the value of the phone and says that if it's a valid phone or not. We don't need to create this function. Instead, we're going to use a package called validator. So I open up my terminal again, and here let's install the validator. So I use bound for installing that, bound add validator. Okay, it is installed, and let's get back to our API. And here I'm going to use the validator package. And here, instead of using this dummy callback, we're going to use the validator package. So first we need to import the validator. I'm going to say import validator from validator. And then I get back to the refine function of the phone field and just remove this dummy callback. And then I pass the validator that is mobile phone function. Okay, so this is a function that takes a value, and then if it's a valid mobile phone, it will return true, otherwise it will return false. So we can use it just like this, validator that is mobile phone, and then just pass a phone number inside it, and if it's a valid phone number, it will return true, otherwise it will return false. So here we just need to pass it to the refine function. It expects a function that takes a value and returns true or false. So in this way we can check if the phone field is actually a valid phone number. And next we're going to have a password field inside our schema. So I'm going to say password, okay, and set it to z.string, and let's put some constraints on its length. I'm going to use the min function and set its min to 6 characters, and let's say that its maximum length should be less than 50 characters. Okay, and we need to put a comma here to get rid of this error. Okay, so this is our register schema, and here inside the post API we can check if the body of the post API satisfies the register schema. So here we can call the register schema dot save parse and then pass the body. It will gives us an object here. So here I'm going to say const validation and set it to register schema dot save parse. And then we can check if the validation is not success. So here I'm going to say if not validation dot success. We can return an error message as the response of this API. So here I'm going to say return next response dot JSON, okay, and then put the validation dot error dot format function, okay. It will automatically create a error message based on the validation that we have here. And then we can put a configuration object here and set the status of this response to 400, which means that it was a bad request. Okay, so let's save this, and now we can test it in the Insomnia. Back to Insomnia, we can send the post request to this API, and this will give us a 400 bad request response. And the body of the response has some error message inside it. For example, it says that the first name is required, last name is required, phone is required, and password also is required. So now let's provide the required field in the body of this post API. Here I'm going to say first name, okay, and set it to my name. Also the last name, set it to my last name. And then we need to include the phone here. Okay, so let's go with some number here, okay, and then we're gonna have a email. Let's put an unvalid email. So I'm gonna say test@test, and obviously this is not a valid email address, okay. And then here we're gonna pass the last field, which is the password, and let's put a dummy password here, okay. So now let's send the request again. It will again send us a 400 bad request, and gives us some error message here. It says that the email inside our body is a invalid email, and also the phone is a invalid input. So now let's fix the email address here. I'm going to put a .com after it and send the request again. You can see that the email error is now gone, but we have a error on the phone number, and that's because this is not a valid phone number. So now let's add some number. Okay, and then click on the send here. Now we can see that we have a response without any error. So in this way, we can actually put the data validation on our API in the Next.js. We can also put some custom error message in our validation. Back in the VS Code, here in the register schema, we can put error messages in each of the constraints that we have defined. For example, here in the email, we can put some error message that says, please enter a valid email address. Okay, so let's save this and back to Insomnia. Here, let's remove the .com from the email and send the request. Here, as you can see, the error message is the custom message that we have just specified in the email function. Okay, get back to VS Code. Also, we can put our custom error messages on any of these constraints that we have defined. For example, let's say that the minimum length of the first name should be 3, and then here we can put our error message that is related to this constraint. For example, let's say first name must be at least 3 characters. Okay, so let's save this and get back to the Insomnia and just remove some character from the first name. Okay, it has now 2 characters, and if I send the request, you can see the error message in the first name, which says that the first name must be at least 3 characters. Okay, and as a last thing in this video, let's do something crazy. I get back to VS Code, and here let's say that we're going to expect a confirm password inside the body of our post request, that its value should be the same as the password. But before moving forward, I want to mention that usually it's the responsibility of the client side to check if the password field is the same with the confirm password, and then it just needs to send the password in our body of request. It doesn't need to send the confirm password. But in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how we can check if 2 fields in our schema have the same value or not. So here, let's add a confirm password here, confirm password, and then let's set it to z.string, no more constraint. Okay, and then at the end of the register schema, we can call the refine function. So here I'm going to call it, and it expects a callback function that takes the whole data as its parameter, and then it should return true or false. If we return true from this callback, it means that the overall validation is successful, and if we return false, it means that the overall validation is not successful. So here we need to check if the data.password is equal to data.confirm password. So here I'm going to say data.password is equal to data.confirm password. So if these 2 fields are the same, the returning value is true, otherwise the returning value is false. And then here we can also specify a custom error message. So I put a configuration object as the second parameter of the refine function, and here inside it we can specify a message, which is our error message, and let's say password and confirm password doesn't match. Okay, and then we need to specify on which field we're going to put the error message. So here we're going to specify the path here, and inside the list we're going to specify that this is going to be error message of the confirm password. Okay, so let's save this and get back to the Insomnia. First, let's put the valid first name. Okay, and also correct the email. Now we can send the request, and it says that a confirm password is required. So now let's put the confirm password here. Okay, and just set it to a random string. I think I have misspelled the confirm here, so let's fix that. Okay, now if I send the request, you can see that the error message on the confirm password is the password, and confirm password doesn't match. So if I copy the password here and paste it here and click on the send, you can see we have the response without any error. Okay, back to VS Code, and inside our post API, after the validation, we can access to our field inside the body with type safety. So here we can say, for example, validation that data, and if I open up the data object, you can see that we have auto completion and type safety for all the fields inside our register schema. So in this way, we can not only put the validation on the body of our post API, but also we can have type safety and auto completion for the body of our post API. Okay, this brings us to the end of this tutorial. And if this video is useful for you, please hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, you can subscribe and support me. Stay tuned for my next video. Have a nice time. Bye bye.